It's May 10th, 2026. We're going to have our third in a series, Parable of the Wedding Feast. And the reason for doing this in great detail is because the conclusions, which are obvious in English, upset a lot of ideas that have been going on for quite a while. So again, welcome. Oh, this isn't grab. It's supposed to grab. Okay. There we go. Last week I mentioned about using the play on words and the nature of the Greek language to provide things for us. And let me see if I can make that a little bigger. And then, yeah. Which gives us a meaning verification, continuity verification, and truth authentication of the Bible. In other words, how do we know the Bible's true and what Jesus said is true? Now, whenever I say, well, no one knows what this means, what I'm saying is everyone uses their opinion and they make up stuff, and when you look it up on AI or whatever, some of it doesn't make sense. So what I've done is I've gone in great detail into what the Greek actually says, so I can first of all figure out what does it actually say. Then I use 45 years of computer science logic, very complicated, sophisticated logic in practice and theory, so that a lot of logic is simple for me, but I still have to work it out. And then I find the play on words, which provides these meaning authentication, continuity verification, and truth authentication. And I'm still using my opinion, but my opinion is based on that 10-pin and 7-pin model, which fits over and over again, and it's based on the play on words from the Greek, which fit over and over again. So yes, it's an opinion, but it fits in, it just follows from those two things. Now, I realize we're in this sequence, and I realized as I do this, and I worked out each little step, each of these stories, we've gone through most of these, and then I look at it, and all of a sudden I see a pattern. The pattern we have here is called a chiasm. It just means it comes in two parts. It descends and then comes back out. And I realized we have a chiasm from the parable of the vineyard workers through the many are called, few are chosen. I did this graphic really quick yesterday after getting the idea, so I need to update it a little. But we have the parable of the vineyard workers. Remember, they come at different times of the day. And then he says, the first or last, last or first. Says that twice. That's the only place he says it, before and after this particular parable. Well, first and last, and there's some interesting things there, not for today, but that fits in with the many called, few chosen, where the few chosen are the ones that go into outer darkness. There are some other things in there. Then after the parable of the vineyard workers, we have some other things, and Jesus says, I'm going to the cross and all of this. All those fit into the wedding feast in reverse sequence. So whatever goes in forward sequence in the triumphal entry, remember he comes in on the colt, the donkey voices, which we get at near the end of the parable, and he turns the tables. And I thought, well, yeah, turning the tables, it's an English idiom, but he actually is doing that in the wedding feast. He's tricking them like Jehu into all the false prophets to coming in, taking care of them. He's turning the tables on them. We have the fig tree curse and moving this mountain, moving the definitions. And that fits in with the stone that falls and winnows. Remember, we had the stone that falls. Then we had, and this is one of the keys, the vineyard, the many and few, and the first and last. But remember, authoritative lack of restraint. He says, I'm not going to tell you by what authority I do it. Then he comes back and says, you haven't read? Have you read this? And then he says something about the rejected cornerstone, which really has nothing to do about authority unless you assume it. But when you go back in the Psalms and find, oh, he's saying this is today. He's answering that. And then he gets into the two children. Remember, the one says, I'm Lord, in the play on words. He apparently goes and makes his own little vineyard. So that's where we're at, and we're down here at the parable of the wedding feast. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing with all their play on words in each one of these. We did that last week. So remember, those servants went out, they went into the paths. They're playing words there. They were supposed to go to the exit pass and call people. And if you feel called, you should come. They went out and grabbed them, brought them in, filled the pews. So these servants were doing what they weren't supposed to be doing in both cases. So when someone gets into trouble, it's a person who went out and grabbed them and brought them in. Even today, what pastors are supposed to do is what? Call people. Feed my sheep. You call them with the word of the gospel. They don't have to come into our church as long as they're doing what Jesus wants. If they want to go to another church, that's okay too. But if you're trying to fill the pews and make the budget, you want to bring everyone into your church. But you're just supposed to call them. You're not supposed to bring them in. And they brought in the bad and the good, or the evil, the oppressive. You just call them. If they come in, that's good. If they don't, they don't. This fits into that 10-pin model. Remember, one went to the field, one went to their merchandise. Now, where were they going to call them from? Where did they go into? Well, in Revelation, no one knows what that synagogue of Satan means, and they make it up. Well, in the model, the synagogue of Satan appears in Smyrna and Philadelphia, that is in the weeds and the pearl, nodes 2 and 6. Those appear to be the exit pass. Because you're going out, you're supposed to call them in from there and see if they come back. So there we have, it's just a model, but the model fits. And we had some of these play on words here. Yeah, it was a little small. But we won't go through all, but every one of these, we have all these different play on words in the whole thing. Some places it's Greek and you just put like that. They're of that mind. They're of the mind because it's just the same words. Some are exact, some aren't. You have ears, and he puts these kayas in. You can't see that, but it's like burn, burn, burn. And that's, remember I said there might be a way to determine and put some statistics on this. And I realized the way he uses this, in some places he changes the words, like adds a definite article, so you don't get the play on words. But there are a few hundred of those by Jesus in Matthew, so that's one of my projects, is to look at that and see how that changes. So here we are for today. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there was a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he said unto him, Friend, comrade, in a descending way, how camest thou in hither, not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Why was he speechless? And people make up all these things. Why was he speechless? Oh, they don't know. We'll look at that. And the king said to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And there are little play on words all through these verses. For many are called, and few are chosen. Again, the only few was that one guy that get thrown out. And that's apparently one of the servants that went out and brought everyone in and filled the pews and wasn't just calling them. And you see, the king said to the servants, didn't he send out servants? And I'll show you this in a few minutes. That's a different Greek word. It's not the same Greek word. The servant who throws them out are not the same word as the ones he sent out and did what they weren't supposed to. Now, some of those servants who went out might have done the right thing, but some apparently didn't. Yeah. Now, Jesus uses the analogy of the wedding garment, and there's also the literal meaning has connections too. So, when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there was a man which had not a wedding garment. That's supposed to be replied, and of course we have the friend there. Might the man that he saw be one of the servants who is there remaining? That's a play on words. Greek uses the same word repeated in a different form. It essentially says he was not clothed in clothes. But if you remember Mr. Miller in the English class, in English, you're not supposed to use the same word twice. Well, they do it in Greek all the time, and they have to change that when they translate it. You've been clothed in clothes of the wedding. This was too close to call. Right? They were calling too close to call. Have you ever been spending time washing a dryer? Watching a dryer? Yeah, anyway, dry sense of humor. Anyway, I once had a flat tire on my bicycle. You know why? Let me put this. There was a fork in the road. Did you ever tire of these jokes? Now, my bicycle kept leading me the wrong way. It was like it was all against me. You know, it's a vicious cycle. It gave me a complex, so I had to see a psychologist. You know. So anyway, so we have some of those, yes. Friend, comrade, etc., etc. And why does he use this word in a condescending way? It's like harlot, you know, courtesan, escort, prostitute. The leaven, you know, the adultery, not in the physical sense, but in the sense of the Jesus being the groom and the church being the bride. So etc., etc. You see the play on words there? And you look at wherever he uses it, yeah, it's not very good. Today it means just like a company, an association, but that was what it meant then. Then we have two Greek words. One's going to be used twice in the same verse, like one in Luke and one here, and one in Matthew. Zemo, it means to ferment or leaven. Leaven's not good, right? Because Jesus says the leaven, they pick up, that's false doctrine. Phimohu means to muzzle. You get muzzled. You can't say something. And so the two words, ezimothi, ephimothi, do they sound a little similar? I give you jokes all the time that are further apart than that, and you get it. Ephimothi, ezimothi. One means leavened, one means muzzled. We see the word for muzzled when Jesus says, hold thy peace, and come out of him to the demon or whatever. What's he saying? Oh, hold my peace. Yeah, I'll put up a peace sign and I'm holding my peace. No. It means be muzzled or shut up, right? But nice, be muzzled. Put a muzzle on. That happens to me if I tell too many jokes and want to put a muzzle on me. Then that makes me think of muzzle jokes, and that gets me in more trouble. Anyway. And he was speechless. No one knows. Why was he speechless? Why was he muzzled? He was leavened, ezimothi, and he was ezimothi. So, and one of the ways I find these is when I hear them from having studied Greek, then I look and say, well, this is not a common word inflection for this verb or whatever, or it's only used one time, 2 times, and the word appears, dozens of times, and that's I wonder if that was on purpose. Yeah. Can being leavened with false doctrine keep one from having a wedding garment? That is, walking in righteousness the way you're supposed to walk. Yeah. And the other place this appears is in leaven. That is in Node 4, where you have the adultery node from the 10 Commandments, where they mix in everything. The kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, false doctrine, which a woman, the harlot, took encrypted in 3 measures, satatria, of meal, of true doctrine, until the whole thing was leavened, olan. Ezimothi, it was all leavened. You can be speechless if everyone's muzzled. How do you muzzle them? By giving them false doctrine. They can't say anything. Oh, this is the truth. You can't say anything or you'll be in trouble. So we have that satatria, that's one of those Satan 3. That's why it's in a different, it's not tria sata, and he uses this obscure measure, sata, to get the Satan 3, and there's some other play on words in there. Friend, how comest thou in there hither, not having a wedding garment? Now the Oda, they use that a lot for, they translate it, oh, here in this place, but it means in this way. So if they say, here is Christ or there is Christ, you're thinking of looking in a location in the Olivet Discourse. It means if the Christ comes in this way or that way, it has to do with the way of doing things, not the actual physical presence. And the Oda at the end is a play on words, not having a wedding garment. In this way, he was speechless. You see the Oda? Omega and Omicron are the same today. They were a little different then. So in this way, he was speechless, and he came in this way. So we have some little play on words there. Next is the word deo, which means to bind. And the word Only it appears 43 times. Only 3 times is it Disantis, and some of those, when that happens, some of them are in the same verses. I mean, Luke and Mark, they'll do these and they repeat the same thing. We'll come back to that in a second. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. And this is the word for deacon. Deacon comes from the Greek word diakonos, and many people think it comes from diakonis, through the dust. That is, a deacon is someone, anyone ever been a deacon or something, and you go through the dust, you're a gopher. Everyone know what a gopher is. It's a little animal, but it's someone who goes for this, goes for that. You're a gopher. Well, that's what a deacon is, through the dust. And they say, well, that may not come from that. Well, it's a play on words, it doesn't matter. So, diakonis shall be your deacon. He said to the servants, diakonis. He's not using the one he sent out as fish bait, the doulos or the doulos. He's sending the deacons to throw the guy out. So he came to the servants. Yeah, we have that. There were the servants. They've been through the sand, through the earth, through the sand house. Here we have the verses. Remember, he sent forth his servants. He sent forth other servants. He sent his servants. He said to the servants, and the servants went out and did what they weren't supposed to do. The servant who throws them out is a different Greek word. So it's not the, he uses a different Greek word, someone who's been through the dust. Now that binding got a little out of order here. Bind him hand and foot, disantis. But then Satan. Santis, Satan, you move the T and the N. It's like everyone hears someone called Santa Claus, Satan Claus. You have a little play and you kind of get it. Well, it's the same idea here, same letter switch. Bind him, bind Satan. Yeah. And so they bound him. Now that Greek word for outer darkness is used by Jesus 3 times in Matthew. He uses hand and foot. The hand is used to often represent the pigs or those who work for the birds, the false teachers. In this case, it would be the servants who went out and did what they weren't supposed to do and filled the pews and brought everyone in. The foot usually represents the fish who swim in sin from the sea of humanity. You're supposed to be fishers of men and not fishers of pigs and fishers of birds. Because a pig or a bird in the analogy already knows about everything they should know. You don't go fish them out. You fish people who've never heard. Birds will try to fish them and turn them into pigs, at people who work for them. And that's just the animal analogy. And they use a young pig, hiron, rather than the full-size pig. And people, no one knows why they do that. Well, if you want to make a play on words with hiron as bad, or hiron as your hand, it doesn't work with a full-size pig. You got to use a baby pig. Just like in the sheep and goats. No one knows why they're young goats, if you notice it. Well, it's the eriphone. If you make it a full goat, it doesn't work. But eriphone literally means eris, bad logic, and voicing, phona, as phonograph, phone. So the goats are actually voicing invalid logic, and that's what the play on words is. So a lot of these, the words are picked to fit the play on words, and if you don't realize that, you go making up all these other reasons for it. Cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth. And people try to make an analogy with what they said about the gnashing of teeth and things from the Old Testament. When you look that up, they never use these sequence of words. The words are like in the same verse, but they're not in this order, and so these are very specific words picked for very specific reasons. And going back to the 1930s, in some of the seminaries, like at Princeton, they would talk, well, what do you do if you don't have teeth? Well, you might have dentures. They'll give you dentures so you can gnash your teeth. That was what they were doing in Princeton in the 30s, we know from something. That weeping and gnashing, klathmos, if we change a spoonerism, we get kragmos, screeching, gnashing, vrigmos, vlithmos. Move the spooner and move the obliviousness. There will be screeching in obliviousness, and whosoever, or, there shall be, and it's KO. We all know KO, that means a burn. I burn of the teeth, tonodonton, tonodonton. The O are almost the same. D and da, ta are almost the same. And O are almost the same. To him, backside, of him, it. In other words, they'll be screeching in obliviousness as you burn from your backside going into wherever. Not sure what that means, but that's what the play on words are, and they're pretty close. So then we get to the ending part, the last verse. And he said to him, friend, comrade, and we went through that. Bind him hand and foot. Now, in this parable, who are the many? Aren't the many all those that were called? Now that doesn't mean they're in there and they're going to be judged based on other criteria. It appears, and who are the few? The one guy that gets thrown out, right? And since it's a deacon that's thrown out, it appears to be the servant, because from what we have, that's the only one we know who's done something wrong. Why is it one when he sent out all these servants? Well, he seems to be making a point, and you won't get the few if he has more than one in the parable. So there's one guy so the few. And this is where we get, how many were called? Many were called, right? Some were hidden. They were supposed to be hidden, not come in. Who was chosen? The elect. The one guy, right? What do the birds say? You need to be one of the few, the chosen, the elect. And you need to follow the narrow way. Well, that's not what Matthew 7 actually says. Here, they'll say, to paraphrase it, they'll say, oh, you can be a leader for Christ. Jesus never says to be a leader. You're a follower. And the word follower in Greek actually meant not leading. It's acolyte, but akalutheo. Kalutheo means to command. You're not leading. And they'll say, and you can influence people. You're not supposed to influence people, remember? You're just supposed to call them. And if they come in, that's good. And then they'll say, and let me give you the next steps. Whose next steps? Shouldn't I just go see what Jesus wants me to do? And I'll give you the next steps because they're going to help me. And that's what the birds will say. So there we have the few, the chosen, the elect. For many are called, few are chosen. They're called. Remember, like today, are we calling for rain? Hello, rain, come on in, come on. Calling for rain. Who's doing the calling? How do you call for rain? As an aside, remember in the 12 days of Christmas, the calling birds are collie birds, which were coal birds, which were black, because coal's black. They were like blackbirds. Another bird is kisa in Greek. Kisin is kisa, kisin. It's a play on words where you have the bird being related to the dogs. That appears things in some places. Has anyone ever heard God calling you while you're sitting in church? Some people actually hear God calling them. Now, when God calls you, He's not going to use your cell phone. So you can turn your cell phone off, because while you're in church, He's not going to call you on your cell phone. That was in some French church, and it was interesting as a play on words. Now that word eklektos, picked out, selected, elect, and the Greek word eklekti, when you have a KT, you're supposed to say kata, not TK, but we switch it around in English, it's easier. So the elect we get that word from there. And the actual word just means chosen. But we're looking at how Jesus uses the word. In fact, when you call someone, it's ekklesia, the called out. That's the actual word for the church. The word for church comes from kyrios, which means Lord or Master, where the church wants to be your Lord or Master. But in the Eastern Orthodox, it's called the ekklesia because that's the word Jesus used. It's those who are called out. They're called out, you heard the word, you're doing it. You don't need to go in and fill the pews necessarily, not good or bad. So that's where that word comes from, the chosen, eklektos. We get election from that. Called, that's the believers, the called out. Now, there's a joke that goes traditionally for the denominational churches that have a name, like from Revelation. Instead of many are called, but few are chosen, it's many are cold, a few are frozen. And that's an English word, because they just sit there in the pews, they're frozen, instead of being called. Letter to Revelation. Now, I looked up some of this, of what this means. What does it mean to be called? Oh, I left the question out, but was the AI answer from a few days ago, or I guess last year I did this. Many are invited or called via the general call of the gospel, which is presented through the Bible, churches, missionaries, and any type of evangelism. That's the answer it gave. Yes, and that appears to be correct. That is true. But it doesn't come from this verse. It doesn't mean when you go out and you... so you have to get it. So that is true. Then it says, few are chosen, means that of those invited, only the elect, the true followers of Jesus, will remain at the wedding feast in the kingdom of God. Here we have the elect, and it appears the elect are being thrown out. So there it's a little questionable. Then I said, what is the difference between being called and being chosen? You call someone, you choose someone. It says, however, being called is not enough to be a saint. Who said I wanted to be a saint? Great, right? We must respond to that calling. Yes, positive action is required, yes. To be chosen, the elect, a person must accept his or her calling, be grateful for it, and move forward in serving God and His Son. So I color-coded this because you can see the green part is correct. When you create poison, you mix in a little poison with the true stuff. There are some things here that don't quite fit, and some of this in the green does not come from this parable, it comes from elsewhere. That means don't say, what's in green it appears to be correct, it just doesn't come from this parable. So again, we have the whole parable. Who are the many? Who are the few? Who are the chosen? Yeah. Now let's look. Are we sure we got this meaning right? Many are called, few are chosen. How would we know if we got the meaning right? I wonder if there are any play on words in here that would help substantiate the meaning. And few, oliki, ke, and same today. Oh, and they said the same thing, like you say O-H-O. Oh, wolves. Leaky, and it could also be a type of bird. Oh, the few are chosen. Oh, wolves. What about the elect? Eklektos, electros. You see electros. One means picked out or chosen. The other means rooster, husband, not wedded. You're not wedded, you're doing adultery or whatever, you got the rooster. Is he comparing the elect to roosters who deny Christ? Because we got a little play on words in there. Think of the electros as a cluck, 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 cluck. We got a cluck from the bird. So we get this. Many, and the police is related to the city, or many, are called kliti. If we do a spoonerism of that, we get triki, which means hairs. Didn't it say the hairs of your head are numbered? The head is Christ. The hairs can be black or white. Those are the ones who are part of the head, part of Jesus, the head. So when you're called, you accept the call, you're a triki, you're a hair. Triki, clicky. But few, O leaky, O wolves, are chosen, rooster, not wedded. And so we get almost every word there. Police, kliti, triki, O leaky, and eklektos, electros. Is that close enough for a joke? If it were a joke, you'd understand it. So we get it close. And the fact that we got all these words together. Remember, you can't make yourself as a hair white or black, light or dark. But Jesus appears in Revelation, only the white hairs are left, so you don't want to be the dark hair. Yeah. Now, there are some other parables. Luke has one. The parable for the feast is a setup for the parable of the Great Supper. We're not going to do that. But again, it's a literal interpretation, and Luke rearranges what's there. Okay, so that's been the parable of the wedding feast, number 3. I think next week, once we've established the word that the elect are not good, I want to go through where Jesus uses the word elect and where Paul and Peter and some others use the word elect. What we'll find out is that in letters that appear to be written by Paul, Paul knows the elect are not good, and he uses the words in a not good way, but you can't have that, so they have to mistranslate them to be good. It makes more sense when they're not good. And then some of the words that weren't, books that weren't written by Paul, the word elect is used in a good sense. I'm not sure Paul would have written that good sense. One of those ends up being 1 Thessalonians, which they build the whole idea of the rapture. And the rapture appears to be when he comes in and takes the elect out, which are the bad ones, and leaves all the good ones here. It's the opposite of what the movies and everything say. So that's interesting, and that actually affects how things have happened through history in the past 2,000 years. You say, where do I stand? Well, as long as you're doing what Jesus wants, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and body, appears to mean and have integrity, not doing things that are inconsistent. And you love your neighbor as yourself. Don't do things for your neighbor that God doesn't want you to do for yourself. You're okay, and most people get that. In every religion, they have people who are doing that. Christian religion and so forth. What you don't want to be is the bird who is part of the elect, who uses their position to deceive people for their own benefit, and that's what the birds are called. Now, we can't decide who's a bird and who isn't. God will decide that, but you don't want to be deceived by those birds. Thank you. We'll